Welcome to Becoming Parents Podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Campbell. I'm a doula in Washoe County, Nevada, a Medicaid provider, a lactation educator, childbirth educator, and mom of 18. You can find me and connect on doulainreno.com. Remember, give a shout out to those who are brave enough to share their stories with us on how they have become parents. Let's dive in. Welcome to Becoming Parents Podcast. I'm the host, Jennifer Campbell, and today I'm with Doris, and I'm really excited about this. We have a lot of things in common, so we had to not pre-game too much. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm so excited about being here.
I want you to just jump in and share your parenting journey.
All right. So what's interesting, I guess, about my parenting journey, it began in 2004 on the campus of Florida State University. I found out that I was pregnant. I was 19 years old, a sophomore, first generation college student, first a person in my family to go to college, first person to graduate high school without a baby in maybe 5 generations. Yeah.
Wow.
And then I find myself pregnant at 19, my sophomore year of college, by someone that I knew I didn't want to continue the relationship with.
Holy cow. Okay.
Not the best so I'm going to dive right in, right?
I love this. This is great. Okay. Holy cow. How did you navigate that?
Oh, man. God, but God. So I find myself with all those circumstances. I'm pregnant. And honestly, I had been a high achiever. I'm on full scholarship. I wanted to hide it, right? I went in the phone book, looked in the phone book, saw advertisement, pregnant, confused. I'm like, yeah, that's me, make an appointment here. I call, I go. I'm going under the belief system that this is an abortion clinic.
Okay.
And I was ashamed. I was embarrassed. I thought my life was over. The faster I could get out of the situation, the better. And so I go there, and as I'm approaching this clinic, a woman approaches me. It was fall. It was in November, and she had on like a trench coat almost. And she said, "You can't do what you're thinking about doing if you name that baby." And I looked at her. "Excuse me, ma'am? You wouldn't be able to do what you're thinking about doing if you named that baby. Name that baby right now." And I said, "Justice." And she said, "What if it's a girl?" And I said, "Justice." And so she was like, "Would you hurt Justice?" And I'm like, "No." As I go into the clinic, or what I thought was a clinic anyway, turns out to be a Christian help center.
Oh.
So I got there, they counseled me, they spoke with me, they encouraged me. And so I left with, the encouragement that I can do this and I'm going to do this. And so my parenting journey really began with this nervousness and anxiety about becoming a mom in just unfortunate circumstances. And so I prayed a deep prayer in my pregnancy. That day when I got back, I asked God for 4 specific things, for him to just cover me and this baby. And I started putting one foot in front of the other. So that's kind of how my parenting journey began. I am now the mother of 4. That same child, Justice, is now 20 years old. I had the great fortune earlier this year, me being 19 and pregnant, seeing her 19 walking across the collegiate stage, maybe 2 miles away from that clinic.
Oh my gosh. So as a doula, I work with it used to be called the Crisis Pregnancy Center. It's called Real Choices now, but it's the Christian Help Center that people go to. And then I teach all the childbirth education classes for them for free. They're free to the community, and I volunteer my time. And it's a way to give back, but it's because of you.
Yeah.
You're the reason why that I do that. Because there can be other ways out, there can definitely be other ways. Yeah. So I love hearing the after story in this because in the front end, you're doing a lot of work and not knowing how much of a difference that you're making. And with you, it was huge.
It was a huge difference. Yeah. It made the difference.
Tell me about the relationship you had with the person you were with. Did you let him know? Was he on the birth certificate? Was he involved? And how the pregnancy went and how you felt talking to your family and finishing college. Like I want to know the things.
All right, so let's dive in, right? So I found out I was pregnant twice actually, right? So I found out the first time I had to be close to 5 weeks. I started bleeding. They told me that most likely
Mm,
I was miscarrying. And then when I went back the next time sick and found out I was actually pregnant, I was about 10 weeks pregnant. I had
okay.
stopped dating the dude completely.
Okay.
Actually, from the night that I conceived, the next day there was an incident, and I said, "Oh no, I'm not dealing with that." And so I had cut the dude completely off. And I had actually started dating someone else for about a month when I found that I was pregnant. And so what happened with him is he is a part of Justice's life. He
Hmm.
was off and on throughout the years. He came around closer to her, teenage years and tried to establish a relationship or friendship. We were very cordial over the years, but maybe it was because he was very non-active. So there
Yeah.
really wasn't anything to fight over. So cool part about my story, I'm dating this other guy. We dated for about a month. I have the conversation with him. Hey, you're a really nice guy. I just found out this information. It's been really great knowing you. And he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm kind of freeing you, right? Because my life is about to be different going forward. And he says to me, well, I like you, you like me. Let's just see where it goes. I'm okay dating someone with a child, and how much you'll just be someone with a child. And I asked him, like, do you have a fetish for pregnant women or something? He's like, I don't think I do, right? He's like,
I don't know yet. Let's
yeah,
see.
yeah. I don't know, but I don't think I do. And so we've been together now 21 years.
Oh my gosh, that's so great. All right. Wow. So I
It
did
was
not
one of
see
my
any of that
prayers.
coming.
The
Okay.
four things I prayed for.
Okay.
I was very specific. And I said, God, please don't let me, I don't want to know single motherhood. I don't want my daughter to know the absence of having a father. I want to be able to give her the things, that I didn't have. Like I wanted to be able to give her a lifestyle, and I wanted her to surpass me.
Oh.
I prayed that the day that I left the clinic, and sure enough, I married the guy I was dating. We now have 4 children together.
So
We've
he
been
did have
together
a pregnancy
21
fetish.
years. Right?
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Wow. I mean, how old was he?
He was 19 also. We were sophomores.
That's
Oh, it
that
was insane. Imagine going home and meeting the parents and the whole nine. Yeah, it's the way you think
I'm
it is.
pregnant with someone else's child, but he wants to be with me. I mean, I would counsel my son at that age to be real careful about that decision because I know on the other side, marriage is hard, raising kids is hard. There's going to be
Definitely.
another dad involved. To what degree at that point, you don't know. And just like all the things, are you crazy? This is
Crazy.
altering your life in a very big way. So I wouldn't counsel, I don't think, not to do it, but to be real aware that it could have really adversely affected your life, your daughter's life, his life. So I love this story. What did your families think? Like, holy
Oh,
cow.
it was interesting. My family, they suspended judgment very well. Like I could feel the vibes, I could see the stares, but they were just like, okay. I remember at my baby shower, he attended my baby shower with me, and we went down from Miami, Florida. And my dad kind of says to him, you know, the baby isn't yours, right? And I'm like, Dad, he knows the truth, but he wanted to make sure because it's why is he here? Like he knows the truth. And I'm like, Dad, he knows the truth.
Oh
But
my
my
gosh.
dad tried to whisper it to him, like if he didn't know, he was gonna find out. And his parents were very, I think, very welcoming. His father was like, he had the conversation, you love her, you love him, you're gonna have, he's like, well, I'm gonna be a grandfather. And
Oh,
that was it. And that's who he has been this entire time. His mom had more reservations, and I can understand because our son right now is 17. And so
right?
I can definitely understand what it must have felt like for her. Didn't get it at the time, but I definitely get it now. And so,
Yes.
yeah, it was interesting. I think it naturally took her a longer time to come around, but the family came around and they love us all as a unit. So it's been amazing.
I mean, I know when, like, I had a daughter who was pregnant at 16, had a baby at 17, and she did the same thing. She sat at the abortion clinic, called me, Mom, I can't do this. And I was like, Great. Like you have two other, now you're down to two options, adoption or you're a parent. And she's like, I think I'm supposed to raise her. And she's now 18 now. And you can really dislike a situation or have really huge concerns about a situation, but it doesn't mean I didn't love her and I didn't love the baby. I
Yeah.
wanted a different situation for her. So you can, that seems like a lot of conflicting information, but like you said, you understand that now,
Oh, I
right?
definitely
You
understand it.
don't get it until you're on the other side.
Hmm.
I think of situations with my now ex-husband's family, like, why in the world were they so open and welcoming to me? I don't know that I would be that much to one of my child's, relationships. So it's also a good example of how to be as a parent. So I love
Yeah.
that. You're pregnant, you're a sophomore, you guys go back to school, and then what? Because you're both in college. Was he the first generation in college or graduating also?
No, he was more so second, third generation. So his
Okay.
family was a lot more established than where I came from.
Mhm.
Still very humble beginnings for both of us. But I started working a full time and I continued to go to college. I was determined to get the degree that I came there for, and I did. We had our first child together, 3 years later. And so
Yeah.
we had a second child in our last year of college, and we both graduated with both of our kids and relocated together and started our careers. And again, it wasn't a fairy tale in terms of everything was perfect. It's just we choose each other and we continued. And so it's beautiful in that sense. It's like a beautiful irony. Like everything wasn't perfect, but two young people loving each other like so much to where we're choosing each other each day.
Which is a hard thing to do, especially over time. I had a random conversation with my husband. He's like, dating's so much easier. It's easier to kind
Yeah.
of make somebody happy
Yeah.
here and there a little bit than to make one woman happy for a decade. Like that sort of mentality. Dating's super easy in that aspect because you're never
So
intimately
true.
involved enough that you or care enough about how happy that person is or if you're connecting really well. When you're in it, man, for a
Yeah.
decade or two, it is hard. It's
It
hard.
gets hard. Yeah,
It
it's
is
21
hard.
years for us. 21
I
years and,
know
and,
that's
and four
nuts.
kids.
Well, and kids add a different layer and element. I feel like when you're an individual and then you come into a relationship, that seems hard and moving in together and getting married. That and not that it's easy, but having a child where you're parenting together and like everything about who each other is and how you are in those situations
It starts to
and
show up.
you don't know that until you arrive and
Oh,
that's
yeah.
super challenging. So, holy
Another
cow.
interesting thing about our parenting journey is so we have Justice, who's 20 now,
Mhm.
and then we have our 17-year-old, an 11-year-old, and a 5-year-old. So we have a child in sixth grade, ninth grade, and 12th grade right now.
Yeah,
And so it's an interesting parenting journey because you're experiencing children at these different stages at the same time.
right. We have an 8-year gap in our last two. And so I have a son who's getting ready to turn 22 and then a daughter turning 15. And that is the hardest.
Uh-huh.
It's almost like two separate
You got
generations.
like two firstborns. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's not the most fun. It's
Yeah.
just harder. It's harder because the generations are different and
Mhm.
like this our younger generations were the first generations born with a phone in their hand, but you're older, your Justice was not, like it's vastly different. Okay. So you guys both graduated, so proud of you.
Yes, thank you.
Yay. And you moved. And then I do want you to go back because you mentioned that one of your prayers. So let me think. She always knew a father. You got everything you wanted, except it took a lot longer to get the surpassing you.
Uh-huh. Well, honestly, I got to see her really surpass me at 19, whereas I was 19 crying about having a baby. She was 19 walking across the stage with her bachelor's degree in business.
Holy cow.
Yeah, she's in her master's program at 20 years old. Right now,
That,
she's in South Korea vacationing. This was her dream trip to happen after she graduated from college.
holy cow. So like she's an overachiever
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
That's
So I feel
like,
like when I sat at her graduation this May, it's like the Holy Spirit came over me and was like, all of your prayers are answered. You never experienced single motherhood.
Yep.
She doesn't have the abandonment issues of not having a father. My husband is her dad. She knows her birth father. She has a relationship with him, and he respects that my husband is her dad. Um, I was able to provide for her. I worked 20 years in leadership in corporate America. I've had the executive position and things like that before I moved into entrepreneurship. And
Right.
I got to witness her surpass me. So at 19 years old, I can see her life vastly different from mine. So God
You
honored every prayer.
And I know that you were providing for her, but until you got out of college, moved, got settled, and worked in a job, that's a different type of providing than providing
Mhm.
in college. So, I mean, one of them probably took a few years to fully see, but then it was like a 19-year answer to prayer. I just want to point that
Yes.
out because sometimes we ask for that knowing it's going to take 20 years, right?
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
that's a long journey to wait for an answer to a prayer. So,
Wait, honestly, it happened sooner than I thought. Because when I thought about her surpassing me, I'm thinking about this grand life that she would have. But honestly, I prayed that prayer from a deficit position. All I saw
mm,
myself was as this 19-year-old who messed up. And I'm like, okay, I made it out of high school, but I just got to 19 and now I'm pregnant like the rest of the family? And
yeah.
so I'm like, man, I hope that she can be, surpass me, do better than me. I didn't realize all that I would achieve. I didn't know
Right.
that, where I was going to go. I knew I was determined. I know I wanted it, but I questioned it in that moment. So when I said that prayer, I don't know if I really knew what it looked like. I just knew I wanted her to grow up and not kind of fall into the same kind of traps. And so it's amazing to see her now at 20 years old and to be a whole person and her level of confidence and competency and her graduating. And I was side by side with her when she started her dating experience, and she's with that guy and they're going on 4 years together. Um, and he's, and they're a great match. So to see what's going to come out of that. So it's just been amazing to see that, yeah, those prayers were answered, but I knew that it would be a while before I saw it. This happened a lot sooner than I thought.
Which is great. And I love that you said that you were at that point, you were in a place of deficit. I feel like a lot of the times that we're really praying our hardest prayers, we are in a deficit. That's where that comes from. I mean, I always want to remember to pray and be grateful, like have that prayer of gratitude in my life and in marriage when it's really hard and it feels like a deficit, or
Mhm.
with kids when it's hard and you're in that deficit. I think the deficits are easy to recognize and pray about, but having that heart of gratitude. But also, yeah, I love that you pointed out, like, you were in a place of deficit and you didn't even know where you would be. Like,
Yeah.
you wanted her to surpass you at your best, so not just in the deficit. Tell me about you switched gears. I know it took time. You guys have been married, and um, you did corporate America, and then you wrote this book, and I'm so excited about this. It's in my Amazon cart right now. But I love this that you wrote this. So tell me about that transition for you from corporate, because your kids have gotten older, your life has changed a lot in that 21 years.
Mhm.
Take me through that journey and into the book.
So I'll tell you what's happened is I'm almost getting back to myself, I'll say. So when I was
Ah,
younger, I always wanted to be a writer. I've started over these years 10 books and never finished one. And Raising Justice was a book that I started when she was about 4 or 5 years, maybe 5 years old. And it was called Justice Sayings at the time, but I was writing down the things that she would say because this was a child that really held a mirror to me in terms of she asked questions and she was just really curious, inquisitive. And I'm like, man, when I was growing up, I could never say or ask these things. Like I would have thought to ask my grandmother the things that my daughter would ask me. So I started to journal my experiences with her. And so the book really is my parenting journey. It literally starts outside of that abortion clinic. And
mm,
I walk the readers through this experience in parenting a child in a way that I wasn't parented. And what's that like? And so it may lean more on a more of a conscious style or intentionality with parenting, but trying not to maybe put some of the same trauma or hurt on her than maybe I experienced in myself. So how do I suspend judgment? How do I pause in certain moments and not respond the way maybe my grandmother would have responded to me when I was younger? And so I really take readers on that journey. Um, And so, yeah, so that's kind of, when I exited corporate America, which was about a year and a half ago, I was really able to sit down and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to be an author. That's something I always wanted to do. And now is the time. And I prayed to God about, okay, which book is first? Because I've started all these different books. And he told me leadership inside out. So start with what was so much more, the closest to my heart. And so I believe that motherhood was my first leadership position. My next book, I'm going to talk about leadership in toxic work environments and my healing journey from leaving corporate America.
Mm.
But because I was really passionate about that, fresh out. And God said, no, go with what's closest to your heart, and it's motherhood, because that's really where leadership started for you.
Ah,
And a lot of people don't think of motherhood as a leadership position,
oh,
and it
it
really
is.
is. It really
And
is.
don't you wish, I always have this thought, like people get really um offended by prenups, and I'm like, what if we thought about them differently? Because every time you go to a job interview,
I agree.
right? I knew
Yeah.
you would, because I wanted to parent better than my parents had, but that wasn't a very high bar. And I didn't even know what that meant. Like avoid alcoholism, physical and emotional and sexual abuse. That is a super low bar, but it didn't teach me what I want to do or how to do it or how to do it better. Right. So you learn through fire, you learn by
Yeah.
doing it. And I always thought if I just want to be a great parent and I try really hard every day, I won't mess up my kids, but we still mess up our kids because we come in carrying baggage and
Baggage.
not knowing what we're doing, right? So I always thought if we thought about our marriages and our raising kids more like we do a job interview or a prenup, what are the expectations? Let's do a check-in every couple months. Are you going to get fired or are you going to get a raise? It would actually make more sense. It takes some of the emotion out and it really structures what are your values, what's important to you, and how to do this in a less emotional way. The emotions are there no matter what. But
Yeah,
yeah,
but you're
so I
beginning with
love
the
that.
end in mind. You're beginning with the end in mind is
Right.
where you want to take this child. And so you hear those type of things in the book. I'm openly sharing my thought process in terms of, yes, she's a child, but I'm raising an adult. And if I know that I want her to be this type of adult in this world, what are the things that I can do now? And so I talk about intuition and how we had a situation where I honored her intuition. I didn't make her give me all the evidence of something before I believed her. She felt it, it was enough, and I reacted to it. Because sometimes we need to empower our children in those ways. And I think that that is part of that closeness and glue that her and I have. That moment when I honored her and didn't make her prove something. She felt it and it was enough. So how do you build those type of really good character building things in your children? It's the little moments along the way. So I talk about that in Raising Justice. And so I'm biased, but I believe it's a really, really good book. It's not a book about perfection. I talk about the things that didn't go right. And
Yeah.
my reflection and my hindsight and the type of conversations that I had about sex, or when I realized that I thought I had taught her who her biological father was the whole time. And I remember the moment when she says, wait, he's not my biological father. Like, wait, I thought you remember when I took you there? And she's like, yeah, that's my dad, and I'm just like, what kind of mother am I? I'm thinking the whole time she understood and she didn't even understand. And so you get to hear these very just raw moments of just reflection as being a parent. And so I think a lot of people can relate to it.
I you also I want to jump this in too because you did a 4-part podcast series with your daughter
Yes.
about the book, which I love. And you had a guest on one of them. I haven't listened to them, but you had to have gotten permission from her too, to write
Because
this book. I mean, the parts about
I'm
you,
telling her business too, right?
yeah, yeah, it's about you, but she's very involved in this because it's
Yes.
that parenting journey. So like permission and even like doing some of it together because there's a lot of perception. We can both watch an hour-long sermon or speaker and go to lunch and you could say, "Oh, I got these things out of it." And I'd be like, "Really? I got these things out of it." So
Uh-huh.
we can both sit in the exact same thing and less than an hour later talk about it and have a completely different response. So when you're talking about parenting her, like you thinking, "Oh, I told her about her birth father," and she's like, "Who's my birth father?" very different vantage points
Yeah.
of the exact same like, are we both in the same?
Same.
I always look at my husband and I'm like, are my powers of invisibility on right now? I'm not like,
Yeah,
that's my
yeah.
go-to. Like, are we having the same conversation? Are we doing the same thing? I'm always like, I think my powers of invisibility are on. Hang on, please. So you would really, this would have had to be to some degree a joint project or in some way collaborative, and you turned it into a 4-part podcast. So what was
Yeah.
that experience like of writing? How many moments were you like, what? Or was she like, what? Wait.
Yeah, yeah. So she had some moments where she was like, "Oh my God, I remember that." And and so she was kind of filling me in. So it was good to hear her reflections as I was writing the book. So chapter by chapter, we went over each one together because I prayed about all the chapters and what needed to be included because there's so many other stories that I could tell about raising her. But I prayed over these, and these are the specific ones that I know were meant to be shared. And so doing the writing and the editing process, she read everything and gave feedback. And so I made sure that she was comfortable with all of the
Right.
stories. Again, I've cultivated this relationship of trust, of transparency, and I'm not going to ruin it by trying to sell a book. So I want to make sure that my daughter was okay with everything that was shared. If there was something that maybe it wasn't as accurate, she had an opportunity to say, Mom, actually, I was coming from here when that happened. I'm like, oh, I always thought you were over here. No, no,
Right.
no. And so we were able to true up and clarify those things. So she's been a part of the whole process. And so the podcast came about because I had been doing a few podcasts and people like, you really should get into this. And her and I always have mother-daughter talks. And so it's called Mother-Daughter Talks. And a friend of mine was just like, you guys should really do a podcast because the way I hear you engage and speak with your daughter and the way that you guys are able to just kind of spar with each other, I think people would love seeing that. And so I looked at her and I'm like, you want to try something like that? And she was like, I mean, we do talk all the time and we talk about topics and current events and we view them differently. She tells me her opinion, I tell her mine, and this is why. And so we were like, let's just give it a try. And so that's how we started doing our mother-daughter talks on camera,
Uh,
rather.
I think that's just amazing. I've interviewed some of my kids, and those are some of the hardest and also most exceptional interviews. Like I had one daughter, I knew she had had suicide attempts, but she really opened up, like live on video like this, about her final suicide attempt and the information about it that I didn't know. And I sometimes with my kids, I'm like, were we all living in the same house? Was I ever there? Like, how do you think you backed the van into the house when? There's all these
Yeah.
things with your kids when your kids are close that they keep their cards breasted with each other. So sometimes we'll have conversations around the dinner table where I was like, who are your parents when all this was happening? Like,
Yeah.
and also just that they don't always come forward and tell us everything. And when we learn everything, our mama hearts really hurt. But those are great conversations too. So I love that you did that. I love it. Tell me about what you're doing now. So you said a year and a half ago you left and you wrote the book. You wrote the book. So
Yes.
congratulations.
Thank
That's a
you.
big deal. And people can get that link in the show notes to get the book. You also have a link to buy it signed.
Yes, if you
So
go to my
there's
website.
there's two different links for that. Um, I want people to know that. When you left corporate America, you decided you wanted to write a book. God really put it on your heart that this was the first book. So that makes me believe there are other books. And what are
Plenty.
what and what are you doing now?
So I am an ICF accredited leadership coach. And so I do leadership coaching for executives and small business owners and management consulting. So pretty much if they have a people problem, I have a solution for them. So that's pretty much my full-time gig is I'm coaching and consulting and facilitating across the country, just teaching, leadership development skills. So also, I am editing my second book right now, and I have about 4 or 5 books that are just kind of lined up, right? And
Mhm.
this book is due to release in January. It's called Pieces to Peace: Overcoming Corporate and COVID. And
Oh,
so, yeah, so this is about my healing journey out of corporate America. I've had great times in corporate America. I am grateful for the good, bad, and the ugly. But really, I was a person that had a terrible bout with COVID, 7 days in the hospital, uh, 3 months of oxygen treatment. And it was the first time I had been still my whole life. I had been gainfully employed since 19, 20 years old, raising children, busy traveling executive, and I get COVID and I am sat down on oxygen for 3 months. And it was in that quietness that I realized that I'm doing really good. Things are going great, but am I living my purpose?
mm,
And so it got the wheels to really turning about how do I align my actions better with my purpose? And so when I made the leap out of corporate America a year and a half ago, this journey has been about aligning my actions with my purpose. So in Pieces to Peace, I tell how the right set of circumstances, which is sarcasm, toxic work environment, helped me to make the leap, and how I healed myself emotionally, mentally, built my confidence back up, to now thrive in entrepreneurship. So I am editing that book to release in January. Yeah,
yay.
that's what's taking up my time. And then
That
I'm raising my beautiful children.
Well, that takes a lot. And that's got to be a really big shift for you. I know when I went from working corporate back into being an entrepreneur, it shifted so much, but one of the things that it did for me was it created a flexible schedule.
Yeah.
So even though I probably work more hours as an entrepreneur, definitely
Yeah.
by
But you
far,
work when you want to.
but it's flexible, but I also didn't have to miss things because
Mm,
I could work my schedule around my kids. I could start at 4 in the morning if I wanted to. So have you had that experience where ending corporate America and going into this has allowed you the flexibility to be a better mom? I felt like I could
yeah.
be a better mom because I was just there more.
No, yeah, I love it because I do get to put my family calendar first. And I had already started doing it a little bit in corporate America, but just to have this full autonomy, no
Yeah,
mom guilt, no having to prioritize somebody else's business over mine or my interests or the interests of my family has been a wonderful experience. And I feel like I keep up with my home a lot better than I was able to before.
yeah,
And I've noticed, things that man, I hope I didn't miss this before. Like, was this always here? Is this
yeah,
something new that they're developing? But I'm so much more aware of everything that's happening with them. And
yeah,
so I'm grateful, and I know that God's timing is perfect, that He didn't want me to miss out on these things. My 5-year-old needed me a lot more than my other children. And it seems like things happened. They were, toying around with a diagnosis. I was able to be home more, work with him, and now he's doing exceptionally well. He'll be tested for gifted when he turns 6 because he's doing algebra at 5 years old. He's reading, sixth grade book, but before they thought he was developmentally delayed, and all he needed was a little bit of attention.
isn't that stuff's crazy? That stuff's you just birthed genius children too, apparently. Doris,
Amen.
tell
I
me.
received that.
Tell me, I'd like to end on you giving a piece of advice to there. I know that there are a lot of women who feel stuck in where they're at and don't feel like they're fulfilling their purpose, feel really torn between earning money and being there for their family or making the leap from corporate or stay-at-home mom to being an entrepreneur or writing that book. So in all of that, what's a piece of advice that you would leave them with?
I think what's important, but when you have to
Mm,
give yourself grace because you're doing your best, but just start. The smallest little effort, the smallest little step, they all add up over time. One of the ways that God blessed me is this is a book that I journaled for almost
yeah,
15 years. So I was able to accomplish it. So on all those moments that I felt like I wasn't doing enough, I wasn't following my dream, I'm never finishing these books. Now I have the basis to 10 books. I'm a lot further ahead than most people would be. But I beat myself up for years feeling like I didn't finish anything instead of realizing that even in the midst of everything I had going on, God allowed me to start 10 different things. And
Yeah.
now I'm in the season to complete them. So just start and don't turn your nose up at the little efforts, at the little things. Do the little things. 30 minutes of writing, 30 minutes of working towards that plan, but all of it adds up.
Compound interest. Love
Compound interest,
compound
I
interest.
love that.
I love compound interest working for you. Thank you so much for being on. I really loved spending time with you.
Oh, same here, Jennifer. Thank you for the opportunity.